Okay, so welcome back. We're talking about the different types of configuration qualifiers, as they're called, on page 590. Now, I must confess that probably the XXX HDPI is probably pretty doggone prevalent nowadays because, a lot of these guys have really, really huge, pixel densities. Fairly common stuff. So one more time, what's the at thing? If I ask for at a at lens mipmap, for example, and I ask for at mipmap prettykitty.png, what does that mean? Well, that means go find me the best one. The at sign is not a directive that says go here and use this one. It's one that says, hey, Mr. System, go find me the best one. That way I can say, ask for an ID, and it goes, well, I got two things called ET display. I think I'll use this one because this is the best one. Okay, remember how all that works? Good. All right. Now we're going to change topics and talk about fragments on page 593. So a fragment is basically just a chunk of a layout, okay? Just a piece of a layout. And you might think, I read through this and I don't get it. All right, so there's a thing at the end that kind of wraps it up, but let me give you a preview of what they're talking about. Okay, let's just say a website example is actually easier to talk about, even though we're not doing websites. But you know how on a website, you might have like a menu bar, like maybe on the left or across the top, and then as the pages change, the menu bar stays the same, right? As you change through the pages, menu always remains the same. Well, that's kind of what a fragment would be. You have two fragments on a page. You have like a menu fragment and then a content fragment. And then like when you rotate the screen, you can say, well, I don't want that menu to be off of the left anymore. I want the thing to be on the right, or I want it to be at the top or something. And so it prevents you from having to write duplicate code because most likely a view, a layout, is made up of multiple fragments. Maybe there's a menu guy, maybe there's a title bar guy, maybe there's a content bar. And so instead of having to do this over and over and over and over and over again, you just build a fragment and then build them together. Now, in the book, when they make you make a fragment, as an example, they're only using one. And so, quite frankly, if all you're doing is having one fragment, you're kind of defeating the purpose for a fragment, because the whole point of a fragment is you have multiple ones of them and you reuse them over and over again. So if you're not having multiple ones and you're not reusing them, you're probably scratching your head going, what the heck am I doing all this for? This doesn't make any sense. And you'd be right. Okay, so in the book, they're talking about the mechanics of it. So we're going to do some of that. Okay. So fragments have a very, very similar life cycle. Ooh, you guys remember Chapter 6? A life cycle as an entire application. Okay, remember that? Okay, actually an activity. So they have an onCreate, they have an onCreate view, and then they have an attach, which is slightly different, and then an onDetach, and onStart, onPause, all those kinds of things. And so it allows you to fix it so that, I don't know, when I do a rotation or something, I say, wait a minute. Instead of just blindly getting something, it goes, So part of this thing is going to go grab me the best fragment there is and then put it in the right spot. Okay, cool. So I'm not going to go into too much detail of that. It's pretty decently covered in the book. So we're okay. All you need to know is, very, very similar to the way an activity works. So a fragment manager, if you recall when we started talking about dialog boxes a few chapters back, we talked about you can only have one fragment manager. Okay, and the fragment manager is the one who controls all the rest of the fragments. That kind of makes sense, right? And so we did this in Chapter 14 when we did the dialog fragment guy. But here, envision like a menu bar, one more time. A menu bar, and whenever somebody clicks on something, or I move the menu to the left, or do something to it, this fragment manager is the one that takes care of all that for me. Takes care of the placement, takes care of all that stuff. So, on page 602, they basically step back and talk about the fragment reality check. That's a pretty cool section. You really need to read every single word. It's only it's just a paragraph or so. Read every single word in there. It's actually pretty good. So why use fragments? Well, because I don't want to write the code for the menu 4 times. I want to write it once and use it over again. That's a very, very good example of using a fragment. So it's kind of sort of important to understand that. Also, fragment, remember on the previous chapter we talked about the model view controller? Well, fragments basically do the view and controller function for you. And so they bundle those pieces together. So the view, remember, is what the person sees, and the controller is like the input validation part. Right? Remember all that? So user input goes to the controller, and things that they see go to the view. So it bundles those 2 pieces together so they kind of glue together wherever you put them. Kind of sort of makes sense. And then, of course, duplication. I don't like to have duplicate code, particularly if I'm using a fragment in multiple layouts, okay, or have multiple activities inside. Remember, we've done an example of multiple activities, right? So yeah, multiple activities, and then use the same fragment in each one of those activities. Okay, we have reached the end of this chapter. This wasn't a long chapter. It's got some cool stuff in here, and one of the skills you're supposed to have learned in here is how to create a separate layout the easy way, which was using that goofy little button, if you recall. If I go here to this guy and go back to the designer, this little guy allowed me to actually build. Here's create a tablet variation. Remember we talked about tablet versus landscape, and so this allowed me to switch to a different type very easily, and then maybe I have to go in there and add another control and move some things around. So yeah, you're going to need that skill to be able to do your term assignment. Okay, that is it. The next time you see me in a video, it'll be for the final exam. See you guys then.